Walid Phares is up next, but first, some news. Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced Thursday that they've reached a ceasefire agreement between Turkey and the Kurds, following a meeting with Turkish President Erdogan. The Turkish offensive began after President Trump announced the withdrawal of American troops from northern Syria earlier this month. The deal is for a 5-day ceasefire, during which time the Kurdish-led forces could pull back. All Turkish military operations will pause during that time, and the operation itself will come to an end upon the completion of the Kurdish withdrawal. Pence said a safe zone between the two sides will be established. With me now to unpack this very thorny diplomatic situation as tensions run high in the Middle East, I'm joined here in Washington by national security expert and former foreign policy advisor to the president, Dr. Walid Phares. Walid, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you here. Okay, the president made this decision. Apparently, we have this ceasefire now, a 5-day ceasefire. What went into the making of this? What drove Erdogan to the table, and where do things stand now?
President Erdogan of Turkey has launched the operation with the aim of pushing the actual Kurdish forces and population maybe 20 miles south of 20 kilometers south of Turkey, and replacing them with Syrian refugees. That would have been very, very dangerous, because that would have been ethnic cleansing for the Kurds, the Christians,
right,
and then a civil war for years to come. What has happened is Vice President Pence and Secretary Pompeo negotiated with him, first for a ceasefire. So now we have a ceasefire.
Okay.
Second, yes, Turkish forces will move in. There will be no ethnic cleansing. There will be a security arrangement. Now we are going to observe if this is going to hold or not.
Right. Now, what becomes of ISIS? The Kurds were our allies in fighting ISIS, but remember, the Kurds don't have a homeland. They're looking for one. So they were fighting for that, and ISIS was incidental to that. But they were part of why we were able to break up the caliphate and arrest so many of these ISIS fighters. What becomes of ISIS? Does it reemerge now? They say they're breaking out of prisons. How true is that reporting?
It's true, but let me put it in context, Raymond.
Okay.
So the Kurds are not everywhere. They are on their lands, both in Iraq, northern Iraq, and in Syria. What they have done was to assist us to destroy the caliphate, but liberate their land from the caliphate. It's like the French resistance helping us after Normandy to liberate France. Now, it all depends on if those Kurds will stand, will survive, they will continue to help us. But if they are dispersed or pushed back, guess what? ISIS will be back. Now, detention centers, yes, they had thousands and thousands of these ISIS. And I have recommended to the administration and to the international community to have an international force that would deal with them. I don't know with this deal how will that work, but we'll see. We have time to observe.
Yeah. I am concerned, and I want to get your notion of the fate of Christians in Syria. There's already reports of a Syrian politician trying to bring the Kurds and the Christians together. She was slaughtered by these Turkish militia groups. How concerned are you now?
I am the most concerned about this matter. In this whole agreement, the Turks are strong, the Kurds are, strong enough to defend themselves. Christians are not. And we've seen over the past years that any jihadi group, not just ISIS, can destroy them and will destroy them. So my first question, who is going to protect the Christians, Assyrians, Syriacs, and others in that security zone? Why? Because I have a second concern, because the Turkish army won't be alone in the security zone. They don't speak Arabic. So who are they bringing with them? Muslim Brotherhood militias, Islamist militias. So this agreement is good for the ceasefire, but we have to pay a lot of attention for what comes after.
This is very fragile.
Very fragile.
We're talking about 1,000 troops, right? Where were they? Why was this withdrawal such a big idea? The president, we know this is part, and I'm going to play this. Yeah. This is the president kind of downplaying the criticism when he made this decision to back these troops off in Syria. Watch.
But I think we're doing a very good job in the sense of strategically. We have Syria talking about their land. It's not our land. Turkey has gone into Syria. And if Turkey goes into Syria, that's between Turkey and Syria. It's not between Turkey and the United States, like a lot of stupid people would like you to believe.
Now, he has this mindset, and I've had him describe it to me one-on-one, where he visits Walter Reed. He has a real heart for these troops and young men and women going and dying in places that, in his mind, does not represent a crucial American interest. Your thoughts on that?
He represents the deep nerve of a majority of Americans who have enough of wars and these foreign wars, especially that during the 8 years of President Obama, they were not explained what was happening with the Iran deal, why are the jihadists coming back after Iraq. So all that he represented sentimentally and deep down. The issue now is, where do we want to withdraw from? I mean, if it's the principle of bringing the troops back home, yes. Why don't we begin with Germany?
Right.
South Korea. We're still sending forces to Saudi Arabia. And what's the fate of our troops in Iraq? To zoom on Syria, we were not many there. I mean, like
1,000 troops.
1,000. And in the north, in that part, we were in the dozens of soldiers. And those dozens of soldiers with the American flag were stabilizing. Now, obviously, the president wants to send a message to the public here that he is doing this. He's starting the repatriation of our forces. But let's see how the Turks and the militias who are going to be deploying with them are going to make it easier or more difficult. And I have another quick note here. I'm not only concerned about these militias, but the Iranian militias are also coming. And I'm afraid that the Kurds, as desperate move, may start to be an ally to Assad, may start to be an ally to the Iranians and the Russians, because everybody has left them. That's possible.
Wow. I mean, let's face it, this region has been a mess for a long time.
It has been.
And we went in and destabilized in some ways Iraq. Syria has always been on the edge as well. Look, of course these guys are dictators. That's what thrives in the Middle East. The question is, how long can you allow an American presence there? And I guess that's the debate we're going to have in the coming weeks and months and maybe into this next presidential campaign.
We're going to have a mother of all debates going into the next presidency, because it's going to be part of the foreign policy that the Trump next campaign is going to try to convince the American public, and the opposition is going to try to not convince them of the same thing. I feel that it's not the issue of time. Our presence in the Middle East is what we're doing during that time. That's why I mentioned the Obama administration, 8 years.
Right, the red line.
The red line, leaving Iraq like this, ISIS, not doing ISIS enough. So all of that has to be discussed in our debates.
Walid Phares, what's next? What should we keep our eye on? What, to your mind, is the most disturbing feature of this ceasefire and the withdrawal of these troops? And the speed with which they reacted to the withdrawal of a handful of troops.
This withdrawal is the beginning of a much bigger mechanism of either withdrawal or changing of our direction. For example, the remnants are coming down to southern Syria. Then they're going to be under pressure. Then they're going to move into Iraq. And I think that the next chapter is going to be the beginning of withdrawal from Iraq. There is no other choice, because if the idea is we cannot keep those forces to achieve a social construct, so what is the other option? Unless we have a policy in Iraq to strengthen the Kurds there, to strengthen those who are pro-Western there. We have the time to do
Or
it.
you get a Western alliance where everyone and Saudi Arabia and others in their interest say, we're going to have an alliance that goes in and become peacekeepers, rather than it all falling on the United States, which is, I think, where Trump's head is.
That's right. That's why President Trump went to Riyadh. Remember 2017 and called on the Arab coalition to form that force. Had that force been formed, it would have been in Syria helping the Kurds. It would have been in Iraq helping all the moderate elements. So let's see how the Arab coalition will respond to this.
We'll leave it there. Walid Phares, always, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can follow Dr. Walid Phares on Twitter at Walid Phares.